Over a month, around 6% of the UK gather together to worship Jesus.
It feels like we're too few to make a difference.
But the reality is, Monday to Saturday, God has us, scattered in the world, connecting to hundreds and thousands of people.
So wherever you are,
Whoever you are,
whatever you do,
you can make all the difference in the world.
And on Sundays, when we gather together,
we strengthen and empower one another to be sent out again.
For life on our front lines.
Hello everyone and welcome to another Sunday service with us here at SPSJ in Hereford. It's great to have you joining us.
It's another week. We are really looking forward to this service this morning, and we're looking forward to our curate Luke bringing some thoughts a bit later on.
He is, yeah. Today, can you believe, is the first Sunday of Lent, which is quite scary, and that means we're starting our new series on the Frontline Sundays, hence that little teaser that you've got there. Now, obviously, it's worth kind of starting the service again by just mentioning the ongoing situation in Ukraine, especially when we think of that word frontline at the moment. And, you know, we've been constantly praying in our churches for the situation to kind of end. On Ash Wednesday, we joined with the Pope and the Archbishops who called for a day of prayer and fasting. We opened our church up St. Peter's last Sunday as well for the afternoon. And, you know, we just continue to pray for all those who are affected and all those who are trying to bring aid and relief and peace to that situation, which is just horrible. But I think, you know, it's easy to think of a front line in that terms, isn't it, in a context of a war. But actually what we're looking at in these 5 weeks is we've all got that sense of a front line. And, you know, I do think, how did we get here in the West? How did we allow this to happen in Europe again? And I don't know, the erosion of the Christian morals and values that we've seen, that we've all kind of lapsed a little bit, who knows? And so that's in a sense what these 5 weeks are about. It's about us being, you know, Christ's hands and feet in those places we live, where we work, where we study, wherever you are, wherever your front line is, actually standing up for God's kind of moral standards in that place, and how it's so important we all do that wherever we are,
Regardless of age, gender, whatever.
Yeah.
We just really hold true to that thought today.
And so yeah, as Claire says, Luke's going to be bringing us the first message on this topic, and just for the sake of those who are in Hereford, just a few notices for you. One being that Luke, if you're in Hereford or near Hereford, Luke needs your help this afternoon.
He does. He has been working his little socks off on this exciting project, which we are really looking forward to seeing and what happens and the fruition of this. And it's
yeah, so we don't have a lot of grass space. Those who know
don't.
our churches will know we don't have a huge amount of outdoor space. We're in the middle of a city centre, but by our one church, St. James, we do have this grass area behind the church, and Luke had this idea to turn it into an eco hub as a garden. And so there's lots of work being done with sleepers to create flower beds and beds to grow vegetables and stuff so the school next door to us can kind of learn how that process works as well. But he needs help because these sleeps are pretty heavy.
They are.
And we need to get them in place this afternoon. So if you're free at 2 o'clock, come down. It's also 2 o'clock next Sunday as well. If you can't come this week, come next week. And as many as possible would be great, just to come and share that burden.
Also, didn't I remember that he's got a bike rack or something?
Yeah, so we'll be setting up a bike rack as well, which is fantastic. So somewhere secure at last for those who do cycle to church that we have, which is brilliant.
So I'm sure if you just pop down, he would love your support, even just to cheer him on, which that'll be me.
So again, also, if you're in Hereford, we said today's the start of Lent, and if you remember, we said that we're going to be looking in more depth at what we're doing on Sundays and what Luke's talking about today. There's going to be an opportunity during the week in Hereford to kind of go further with that. So so that's Tuesday evenings, 7:30 at St James, and Thursday lunchtime is 11:30 at St Peter's, and bring your own lunch with that as well, so we can eat together while we're discussing. That'd be really great to see as many as possible.
Really informal.
You don't
really
have to come to our
chilled.
church. If you're from another church in the city, feel free to join us.
Yeah.
We'd love to, as many as possible to be there.
Just an opportunity to go deeper, especially over this Lenten period.
And we've said, talking about lunch, we said that we're beginning to open up again, kind of post-COVID, and we had our community lunch this last week.
Apparently it was a really
which was
good
great.
atmosphere.
And we're really pleased that that's back on. We know what a valuable ministry it is for those who can feel lonely or isolated, to kind of get together and just actually have that opportunity to eat with other people, which is so important that we do that as
Or
human
even
beings.
just want to go and have a chat and just
Have a chat,
be part
catch
of
up,
community.
get to know people.
I know Heather, our youth worker, went and she said she had a really
She
good
did
meal
go,
as well.
and being our digital lead, she did some filming while she was there.
Some
So
photos put up as well.
well, she's made it into a promo video. Would you like to see it?
Yes, definitely. Here we go.
Here we go.
So we've just had our first community lunch back after quite a while, after a break. How's it been?
Yeah, I'm really pleased. As you say, it was first back after the lockdown and after Christmas and that, and people really enjoyed coming back, having time of fellowship and enjoying a very good meal. So yes, I was pleased. Were you pleased?
Yes, I was.
Yeah.
Yes.
We had a new lady, an elderly lady, come and join us, and we had some youngsters. We had Heather here join us, Tom from the office came, and even one of our church wardens asked if there was some food, and we were able to supply some food for him. So yes, I was very pleased. We meet every first Tuesday of the month at St Peter's at noon. We have a meal which we get from the Berg Hill Golf Club. It costs £5.50 and it's good quality food, it really is. Have a 2-course meal with tea and coffee afterwards. So we would love to have more people come, not just the elderly, but any person who's just a bit isolated, a bit lonely, just needs a little bit of fellowship. If you are retired, then you're most certainly welcome. The young retired people are really very much encouraged to come, just to be alongside with some of the older people. But yes, it's been very good today, and I really would encourage anybody to come and join us. I feel it's a part of the Christian community's service to the people around, particularly those people who have been in the church for years and then find themselves getting older and at risk of being cut off. And I think there's nothing worse than that. And we want to open our arms and our hearts to these people and say, you're still wanted, you're still valued, and we would love to see you here.
So there we go. I love that video. Wasn't it great? I'm so pleased that we've got Heather and her skills here, and we can produce these things now just to share with you what's going on in Hereford. If you're in Hereford or near Hereford, why not come along to the next one? Get in touch and book in. If you're not in Hereford, you live in another city and you just like watching our things, why not find out if there's somebody else near you that's similar, or if not, encourage somebody to start it. It's just great to be able to get together and share time together in that way. So yeah. So should we get on with our service now then?
I'm going to read from 1 Peter chapter 1 verses 1 through to 7, and it says, To God elect exiles scattered through the provinces Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia, who have been chosen according to foreknowledge of God the Father, through the sanctifying work of the Spirit, to be obedient to Jesus Christ and sprinkled with his blood. Grace and peace be yours in abundance. Praise be to the God the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into the inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. This inheritance is kept in heaven for you, who through your faith are shielded by God's power until the coming of the salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time. In all this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you have had to suffer in grief all kinds of trials. These have come so that your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes through, refined by fire, may be proved genuine and may result in praise, glory and honour when Jesus Christ is revealed.
You got there, love?
I know, my eyes were just glistering. Sorry about that.
That's from 1 Peter chapter 1 verses 1 to 7, and Claire clearly didn't read it before, saying I'll do the reading today, and spotting those lovely names of the film. You did brilliantly at the start.
I tried my hardest.
Brilliantly. I was convinced with the pronunciations anyway. So we're going to hand over to Luke now, and we hope you all have a great week. So do engage with all the stuff we've got going on.
And make sure you sign up to our website, and everything is on there if you ever need anything.
Absolutely.
And we'll look forward to seeing you guys soon. Have a great week.
Hi, my name's Luke. I'm the curate here at SPSJ, and it's a delight to be able to start this exciting new series that we're doing together called Frontline Sundays. We'll be doing this over the course of Lent, as you might be aware. So I was wondering if I was to ask your non-church going, non-Christian friends why they think you come to church or why they think you watch online church each week, what do you think they would say? Do you think they'd just sort of say, you're a religious person, that's what religious people do? Or maybe if you go to church in person normally, maybe like, oh, that's where your friends are, you just go for the social element. Maybe they'll say, oh, you probably come from a church-going family. Or they might think that you go because it's a place where there's support. And while lots of these aren't really bad things, and many of them might be true in some sense, they do miss what the New Testament tells us church is truly about. We've just heard some verses from 1 Peter, written to various small groups of Christians. They're scattered across what's now modern-day Turkey, but back about 2,000 years ago. And what Peter does is he drives home what it is to be church by using two particular words, elect and exiles, to the elect and the exiles. And these words directly connect with the new Christians of the New Testament with the Old Testament people of God. And together they unpack a stunning truth that Peter goes on to explain. So what does it mean to be God's elect? It's a strange word. We don't use elect that often apart from in elections, things like that. In Genesis 12, right back at the beginning of the Bible, God promises Abraham that he and his descendants would be blessed and that they would be a blessing to the world. Abraham and his family line were chosen, much as in an election, people are chosen for a position. Not all the Christians that Peter is writing to in his letter would have been Jewish, and so by calling them elect, he names them as part of the blessed people of God. They are included within this chosen people. This means that they're also to be part of the blessing to the world, blessing to the nations. They're called to join in with God's work. So we're called to belong to God, to be a part of his family and a part of his work. And this idea of calling is totally fundamental to what it means to be church. Alongside my curacy, I do this as a volunteer. Alongside this, I studied theology, and my subject that I research is all around this question of vocation and calling. I'll try not to jump on my hobby horse, but I think there's a few things I think have really struck me through my learning that I think it's important just to mention. And I think sometimes we can have some quite flawed assumptions when it comes to calling. Sometimes we think it's only the holy people over there who have a calling. Maybe that's the people who are wearing a collar, or the people who are particularly gifted at doing this sort of thing, or the people who seem to be really confident in, the job that they're doing. Maybe it's only those who are in full-time Christian ministry. There's all this sort of assumption that some are called, not all are called. But the clear message of the Bible and the theological truth is that every single Christian is called by God. Calling is first and foremost about the shared baptismal call that we all have. It's the call to follow Christ, the call to discipleship, to belong to follow Christ, to be holy saints as part of his family, the church. The call to love God and love neighbour in our context and with our gifts. That's something for everyone, not a small elite group. We are each of us God's chosen people, his elect, and so we each share in the work of bringing blessing to the nations. A slide should hopefully come up on the screen that shows some red dots in amongst a sea of white dots. And these red dots are sort of clustered together. And basically this is trying to visualize a statistic that about 6% of people in the UK worship in a Christian church at least once a month or more. Now, that doesn't really sound like very many, 6%, but it is significant. When we gather together, when we cluster like that little group of red dots, we remind ourselves that we believe a particular story about the world. The world is God's. He made it. It's broken and in need of healing and reconciliation. Jesus came and died to bring new life and to reconcile all things. And one day, everything will be transformed. Christian community is vital because we carry this story in the midst of a culture that we may not believe any of that, a culture that may not believe any of those things. The times when we gather together as church, when we cluster of those red dots, when Christian communities gather, is when we strengthen and encourage each other. We encourages us to be who we are, God's chosen people. But then Peter uses this other word, exiles. We're the elect and we're exiles. We aren't always gathered. In this other slide, we see these red dots spread out throughout the sea of white. Most of the time, we're scattered, more like this image. We might be at home, at work, in the community, with friends, in class, wherever that might be, but we're often only one of a very few Christians in that place. Maybe the only Christian in those places. So the second word Peter uses, this word exiles, is a term that recalls one of the great disasters of the Old Testament, when Israel lost their land, were forced from their home, and were scattered far away in the nations. And this is actually the much closer situation of the New Testament Christian communities than a united, gathered, strong nation. Peter writes to these scattered communities who are more similar to our own context in some ways. We can tend to, in the West, sort of lament the loss of Christendom, the time when most of Europe was Christian. And actually lots of our Church of England structures are still designed really around an assumption that like most of the country is or was Christian. But actually the norm for Christianity throughout the ages, and the norm in the New Testament, has been small pockets of believers amidst apathetic, not too bothered, or even hostile cultures. And that's actually where the church has tended to thrive the most. And that was certainly the experience of the New Testament Christians and many Christians around the world today. There's a wonderful image in Philippians chapter 2, verses 14 and 16 that illustrates this really well, which I'll read. Do everything without grumbling or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Then you will shine among them like stars in the sky as you hold firmly to the word of life. And then I will be able to boast on the day of Christ that I did not run or labor in vain. Stars shine precisely because they are isolated pricks of light in the darkness. As exiles, it's important that we don't grey out, that we don't lose our brightness and just become the same as our surrounding culture. God can use us in our scattered context if we're willing not to hide our light under a bushel, but to embrace shining out for him. Over Lent, we've been doing this, over Lent, as I said, we're doing this series called Frontline Sundays. And by Frontline, we're talking about these scattered contexts, these places where we're not gathered, but we're out in amongst the world in the different places we'll be, where we spend most of our time. Of course, the phrase frontline also does carry a lot of different connotations. And I think we need to be particularly careful with this militant metaphor, especially at the moment. But in reading the news while preparing this, I'm really struck by how front lines are often not glamorous or triumphalist. And I was thinking back as well to during the pandemic, the way the media regularly talked of the NHS front line during the pandemic. The front line can be a costly, scary, exhausting, vulnerable, confusing, painful, isolated place. But there are also places where we stand up for what we believe in, where we help and defend others, where we make a difference, where we bravely engage with the world around us. We all have our own front lines, and for many, they're not always easy places to be, or perhaps they're not easy places to shine. We might not have chosen to be there. And even when we have, it can be really tough. And even if we love our front lines, we might find it really hard to be a red dot amid a sea of white. But these are the places where we make a difference, where being a red dot changes the world around us. I'd encourage you, if you're watching with someone, do this together if you're doing it on your own, but to find a bit of paper and a pen. Feel free to pause me to find that, and to just in the middle of your paper draw a circle and write your name or write me in the middle of that circle. Don't do it too big, leave some space around it. And then around that circle, draw some other dots like we had in our slide. And in those dots, write the front lines of your life. Maybe that's your job or the community that you're part of, your neighborhood. Maybe it's places you frequent, groups of people that you hang out with. Go round and add the main front lines in these dots. And then within those circles, you might want to add some names or some groups of people, colleagues or Clive from finance, whatever it might be. But just take a bit of time today to actually try and write out your different front lines, to acknowledge those, to work out the different places where you have an influence and you make an impact. I would love to work out across all the services that we do how many front lines and how many people are represented on our sheets. And I don't think there's an easy way to do that, but I can guarantee it would be a significant amount of people, a significant amount of white dots that our red dots are going to be touching onto as the weeks go by. So I'd encourage you to do this little activity and then keep it. And over the course of this series, to reflect back on it after each session we do, to think what can you do specifically in response to our times together in these particular circles, these particular front lines. Returning to the 1 Peter passage, having addressed them as elect and exiles, Peter concludes his opening greeting with a moving reminder of the wondrous work of the Trinity in their lives. He gives a stunning truth. So I'll read the passage again just to refresh it in your mind. Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to God's elect exiles scattered throughout the provinces, who have been chosen according to the foreknowledge of God the Father, through the sanctifying work of the Spirit, to be obedient to Christ and sprinkled with his blood. Our situations are known by God. We're set apart by the Spirit who is sanctifying us, And we can be confident of our relationship with God, because the sprinkling of the blood is a sign of being included in a covenant. It's an Old Testament image. And all of this foreknowledge by God, this sanctification of the Spirit, this confidence in our relationship through Christ, this is all in the context of obedience to Jesus. We align ourselves with his purposes in the world. We live out the implications of the gospel in our scattered places, on our many front lines. We are elect and we are exiles, and we are chosen by God, sanctified by the Spirit, and welcomed through Christ. Over the next few weeks, we'll be exploring the implications of this for ourselves. Next week, we'll be thinking about wherever we are. The week after, whatever we do. And then finally, whoever we are. And I'm not wanting to give spoilers about it, because I want you to come back next week. But we'll be looking together at what it means to be a disciple-making community for the sake of the world. We're red dots when we gather to strengthen one another as distinct people. We're red dots gathered right now, but we're also red dots when we scatter to the many different places with many different people who can make all the difference in the world. So we're really excited you're going to join us, and I'd love to pray as I wrap up. Loving Father, I ask that over the course of this Lent, you would help us to shine like stars in the sky. That you would help us to be red dots in our front line. That you'd help us to encourage and strengthen each other at the times in which we gather. And we ask this Lent that you would lead us deeper in our own discipleship, in our own love for you, that we might help make other disciples and share your love to the entire world. Amen. Thank you.
One minute. Jobs. Heather's not leaving, she's sticking around, but we are looking to appoint a youth and children's worker alongside her. So pray for us in that process, that we get good applicants and the interview process will go well. New administrator is starting in the next week or so. Pray for them as they start and for us as we work with them and hand over, all of that sort of stuff. Pray for that. Children and youth stuff. Messy Church on the 14th, Our World theme, recycled resources still needed for junk modelling. If you've got any, hand them over. Pray for families to come, and that would be amazing, even more so than the last month's one. CE is going well at Bishop's. Access is going well with the young people who come to St James on a Sunday evening, and our youth band led our worship of the other week. We can see more of that. Chaplaincy stuff, all going well. It's slow, but it's good. I'm here in Enmite today, and we've had a really good morning talking to students about all sorts of things. And lastly, Greenhouse on the 19th of March is where we support lay ministry growing in mission across churches in the city. Come along if you can.